Hi everyone, I'm Mary Miller and I'm Bay Lake Embroidery on Etsy. I'm hearing from many of my fellow Embrilliance users that you're confused about the differences between native BX embroidery fonts and regular stitch-based BX fonts. Native BX fonts truly have superpowers, and in this video, we're going to talk about one of those superpowers, nearest point connections. Let's look at them in the software. Here are two BX font examples. The first one in blue is called Grace, and this is a very popular BX font from Stitchtopia that many of you are familiar with. If we select the lettering object, we can see over here that Grace has a needle next to the name. That indicates that that's a stitch-based font. If we select the honeycomb font and look in the properties pane, we see that there is no needle next to the honeycomb font. That's because it's a native BX font. Again, if you look at Grace and look at the stitch properties, you see that you can adjust the density, remove hidden stitches, and limit the satin length, but that's really all you can do. With the native BX font, Honeycomb, if you look at the stitch properties, you have many more choices and much more control, and one of the controls is this nearest point connection. Let's watch what happens when we run the stitch simulator, first on Grace, which is the stitch-based font. Let's have it fill the screen, turn on the stitch simulator, and let's look at it. So you can see that it stitches the letter G, and it's going to stop at the point that the developer programmed it to stop, which is right here at the end. And then it jumps to the R, stitches the entire R. And notice, even though the R and the A are connected, it jumped to the middle because that's where the letter A starts. So it's going to stop at the end, right here. It's going to trim, and then it's going to jump to the next letter. Even though those letters are touching, there's going to be a stop, a trim, and a jump at the end of each letter. That's how a stitch-based font stitches. Now, if we go back and take a look at the honeycomb font, and we'll make this full screen and look at it in the stitch simulator, honeycomb is a native BX font with nearest point connections turned on. So you'll see that when honeycomb stitches, it stitches all the underlay first, and then it stitches the satin stitches on the outside, and it's going to end right next to the letter O. And there's no stop, no jump, no trim. It just keeps stitching because it's using nearest point connections. We'll let this one play out so that you can see what this looks like. Notice that it stitches. It's not going to stop. It connects right at the nearest point rather than jumping to an arbitrary point where the letters were digitized to connect. With native BX fonts, they use nearest point connections. Why is this important? It's helpful because every time the machine has to stop, trim, and jump, there's a possibility for a thread break, and at a minimum, it slows down your machine and your stitching. Stitching with native BX fonts is smoother, faster, and better looking. That's it for today's video. Let me know if you have any questions about native BX fonts. They really are super powered. Happy embroidering!